Hello, everybody. Good to see you all today. I've literally just moved house a few days ago, so I've managed to find a little corner of the spare bedroom that isn't full of boxes. So don't be fooled by the serene, plain background behind me. That is the only few feet of wall in the whole house. Um, and I think it's interesting that Phil was just talking about learning and development events there, because I think talent programs are one of the things that we do as people professionals that actually spans L&D, HR, through things like succession planning, diversity and inclusion, leadership development, and organizational culture is a huge aspect of that, as we'll get on to. So I'm going to put some slides up and go through the slides. So I don't know if you'll be able to see me as well, or just see the slides and hear my voice. And at the end, I'll share some details of how you can get the research report and how you can get in touch with me. So let me share my screen and we'll get started with that. Hopefully you can see that now. So why do talent programs fail? um, there we go. Right, let's start with a question for you all. And this isn't a question that you have to answer out loud or in the chat box, but you can if you want to. So if you want to answer the question in the chat box, you're very welcome to. But do get an answer at least in your mind, and hold on to it for later. So the question is, I want you to think back over your own career, whatever period of time that spans for you. And I want you to think about what you feel is the personal quality or skill or ability which got you to where you are today. So if at some point you're sitting out on your veranda on your rocking chair, and all the young up and coming people professionals are saying to you, oh, tell us the secret of your success, how did you get to where you are today, what is it that you would say? What would you attribute the success of your career to, or attribute the path or the direction that your career has taken? What is the skill, what is the strength that you have, that you would identify with? So at least get an idea in your mind, and maybe even make a note of that if you want to, and hold on to that till later. We'll come back to that. But for now, why am I talking about talent programs? All of this started a few years back, probably as much as 5 or 6 years ago, with a question. I was getting a number of HR directors all asking me the same question, which was, we spend thousands of dollars in the case of a lot of the global HR directors I was talking to. We spend thousands of dollars a year on talent programs. How can we be so bad at predicting potential? And the reason they were saying this was they were investing huge amounts of money and time identifying high potential individuals and selecting those people for talent programs. Obviously, that's what we're talking about today. But often what they were finding was the people that they were selecting for the talent programs, when it came to internal recruitment for promotions, they weren't the people that were getting selected. What was happening is people who nobody had considered as a contender were actually far more successful when it came to the interview, or far more successful in actually doing the job in case of things like secondments. What I find with a lot of clients and global businesses that have huge global HR and OD and L&D teams, are really not much better at planning ahead than small businesses with no full-time HR support. And one of the things that was happening is somebody would leave the business, a leader would leave the business, or maybe relocate to a different part of the business, and suddenly there's no succession plan. And what do? So we grab somebody out the team and make them the acting manager, and actually they surprise everybody by doing the job amazingly well, and nobody saw that coming. But the people that were identified as high potentials, as they're called, didn't deliver on that potential. So why is that? And a bigger question that came to my mind, which was, is it even possible to predict potential anyway? Because if we think about what potential really means, I think often we get so carried away with our interpretation of terms like this, and we know what it means to us. But actually, if we just stop for a moment and think about what the word means, Potential means a capability that you haven't seen yet. How can you possibly predict that somebody's going to be good at something that you've never seen them do? So this also gives us a clue about how we can better design certainly the selection part of talent programs. So the objective for my research that I did, and this actually came out of my level 7 CIPD course, the HRD course that I did. So the research became my investigating a business issue project for my HRD qualification. And this was the objective of the research. It was, how can people, professionals, add value to a business by making accurate and informed recommendations leading to relevant and impactful talent development programs? Because a lot of companies, and maybe you've experienced this as well, spend a lot of money on talent programs because they think it's, you know, a good thing to do, or they think that it enhances the employer brand, but they don't really know why they're doing it, and they don't really know how to measure what happens, and what you end up with is very sort of ad hoc measures or very subjective measures. And for example, one client I had where I was working on a global talent program, they had as part of the program, they had a project, and one of the project teams developed an app through which on-site engineers could capture sales leads. And one engineer captured one sales lead that generated enough revenue that it paid notionally paid for the entire talent program. And the HR team uh, counted that as a tremendous win, that we've generated one commercial opportunity that's paid for the whole program. Well, the fact that they measure that's a measure of success, tells you what was important to that organization. That's another subject we'll get on to later on. But that sort of measure and hanging on to something that they can say, oh, look, you know, the talent program was a success, really, even though we don't actually understand how to measure it. That's quite a dangerous thing to do. So this research that I did also got me selected as a finalist in the 2019 CIPD People Management Awards. So, you know, that was nice as well. And that's the report, and I'll share a link at the end where you'll shortly be able to download a copy of that. I just need to upload that. Right then, so how I actually did the research, let me tell you a little bit about that background. There were 4 stages of data collection. I observed 9 talent programs going back about 15 years, 9 different talent programs that I'd worked on, that I'd collected data from, 76 direct interviews of career decision makers. So these were managers, senior managers in global organizations who were making hiring decisions both for recruitment and for selection onto talent programs. So 76 qualitative interviews from them. There was a background survey, which was about what are organizations currently doing with talent programs. I had 31 respondents to that. And then there was a detailed survey, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about, and I had 316 respondents to that. So, you know, a reasonable amount of data, I think, to base this on. And in interviewing the decision makers, one of the questions that I and a client helped me with the interviewing as well. So one of the questions that we asked the decision makers were to name what they regarded as the leadership traits that they would be looking for in future leaders, or what were the most valuable traits of leadership. And they came out with all the same stuff that you would imagine, all the stuff that you would write down, that you would list, that any group of people that you would ask would list. That a good leader has to be a team player, accountable, customer focused, persistent, flexible, decisive, good community. It's all the same stuff that you will find in any leadership development course, any leadership book. And of course, the question for anybody going through a process of leadership development is, yes, that's all wonderful, but how do I do those things? How do I get to be those things? And this raises a fundamental problem in leadership development, which is why I will often say that that leadership development in general, as a general activity, is a complete waste of time and money. There's a reason why I say that, which is because if we think, well, we know what the qualities are, but so what does that mean? we're talking about these qualities as if they're behaviors, as if being a team player is something that a person will do. And therefore, because they are doing it, we can observe it. But we can't. You cannot observe somebody being a team player. You can observe somebody talking. You can observe somebody walking into a room, walking into out of a room. These are behaviors. What we're actually looking at in this list here is not behaviors. These are judgments. These are collections that a person has made of a series of observations, generalized together over the time, and they've had a label put on them. I've observed you having a number of conversations, interactions with people, and I've called that being a team player. And because these are judgments, they're subjective. And because they're subjective, they are in the eye of the beholder. Being a team player isn't something I propose to you, isn't something that you can measure. It's something that you observe. And as you observe it, you cannot take yourself out of the observation. The subjectivity is the single biggest problem that we're facing in this sort of approach, and coming up with these sorts of descriptions of what we want our future leaders to do. So the online survey, as I said, had 316 respondents. And what we did was we grouped together the leadership qualities that had come out of the interviews. And we asked people to rank them in order of importance. And that's what they did for a future leader. And then I asked them, what's that, 2 to 8, another 7 other questions about their background, their role, where they're based, what kind of size of business they work in, all that sort of thing. So a load of background questions about the person responding to the survey. Those questions were actually completely irrelevant. Now, you may be one of the people who kindly responded. You may be one of the 316. So those background questions, totally irrelevant. Their only purpose was to get you to forget what you'd said in response to question 1. And then at the end, the final question was asking you to rank the qualities that got you to where you are today. And what happened? They were almost exactly the same. What this says is the qualities that you look for in a future leader are the same qualities that you think got you where you are today. Therefore, the qualities that they were looking for in other high potential future leaders for selection for talent programs or for recruitment were the same qualities that they saw in themselves. So what everybody was doing, and this should come as no surprise, because there's research in, there's bodies of research in psychology that say the same thing going back decades, that what you look for in another person is what you think is present within yourself. So the decision maker's thought process, when we actually get under the surface and find out how is the decision maker actually thinking about the selection process, what are they actually doing? What the decision makers were all doing was something very interesting. They were observing a high potential candidate. They were observing somebody usually in their own team and observing the way that that person would behave, interact at team meetings or customer meetings, that sort of thing. And they would ask themselves a simple question, which is that person showing the behaviors that I admire in myself? And based on that, can I imagine them? Can I project them forwards into a future leadership position? So can I take what I'm seeing of this person now? Can I imagine them in a leadership role in the future? Essentially, can I imagine them doing what I would do? And if yes, if I can imagine doing them doing what I would do based on them doing now what I would do, is I'll support that person as a candidate for the talent program. And so what everybody's doing is being attracted to somebody who represents essentially their younger self. And there's my younger self at the age of, I don't know, early 20s, something like that. So that's what we're looking for. We're all looking for to pass a message back in time, really, to our younger selves, and to find proteges. That's what we're really looking for. So what really happens is the decision makers were recommending high potentials who shared their own traits. and they would then defend their selection despite any evidence to the contrary. So what I observed in these 9 talent programs that I looked at in a variety of different global businesses was, despite a person's actual performance, the decision maker would still defend that person's selection for a talent program, because what they're essentially doing is defending themselves. If you're going to say my guy or my person, my whoever it is, if you're going to say my candidate isn't a high potential, what you're actually doing is saying that I'm not a high potential, and I don't like that. And none of them would really consciously be aware that this was happening, but they would feel bad, and they would resist and create conflict if there was any suggestion that, look, this person you put forward as a candidate for the talent program, they are not a high potential. And what ended up happening was the HR people would feel that they didn't have the strength or the authority to overcome those more political reasons for selection, and they would just go with it, thinking, well, the person's going to get some development, so something good will come of it. And then, as I gave the example of the sales lead, they would use anecdotal evidence to prove the success of the talent program. Even though we haven't really developed the right people, and the right people haven't gone through it and haven't engaged with it, it was a success because of one success story. That's a very common thing that happens in decision making. It's an error in decision making. I think it's called the Texas sharpshooter error, where basically somebody will imagine somebody out in the wilds of the Wild West would get a gun and shoot a load of holes in the barn, and then just draw a target around the holes that were grouped closest together. So they're kind of setting the measure of success after the results. And I'm just looking at some of the comments in the chat already. Video and slide be made available. Yes, they will. Isn't this what our traditional approach to leadership development has been? Yes, it is. Draft a framework based on who we've got, and then fit people in. You're right. And so if you're old enough to remember the fall and rise of Reginald Perrin, you'll remember his boss, CJ. And I think CJ would probably have a good thing to say about this approach, which is, I didn't get where I am today without knowing a good leader when I see me. And that's really what everybody was doing. And that, because they're unconsciously selecting on something that's so personal, what's happening is they're defending that unconsciously out of fear, out of, if you're saying this person doesn't measure up, then that's an attack on me, and they would take it personally. Let's have a look at how this fits in with the CIPD profession map that I know that you will all be intimately familiar with, and I know that you'll have this pinned on your office wall and look at this every day. Principles led. Subjectivity is the human condition. We are subjective animals. We try and create systems and frameworks and tools that give us objectivity, or at least allow us to put some conformity to our subjectivity. But the idea of subjectivity goes back, everyone from Descartes to Covey has talked about this and researched this. And what the principle is that we might be working towards in an ideal world is fair, equal, open opportunities, equitable opportunities for anyone in an organization to grow and develop. Not only the people who are unconsciously favored by by whoever's making the selection. In terms of evidence-based, as I said, these conclusions, they're not revolutionary. The research I did, it's not revolutionary. I've not found out anything new about human beings that we didn't know before. I think what's interesting is just how prevalent it is, just how easy to identify it is, and how it fits into this unconscious process of kind of projecting that person forward in time, that hypo forward in time, and making the selection based on, I can imagine, which is what we all do when we go shopping. When you're going to, I don't know, an event, for example, when you can get back to, as Phil said earlier, when the branch events, live events are running again, and you can get out the house and come to a CIPD branch event. So the first thing that you will obviously do is go down to Next or whatever retailers still survive by then, and you'll choose a new outfit because you'll want to look your best for the CIPD branch event. And you will do the same thing. You'll pick up an outfit and you will try to imagine yourself wearing that outfit in that place where the CIPD branch event will be held, and you'll imagine something and you'll project it forward in time, and you'll figure out, does it feel right? Does it, what are people going to say about me? What are people going to think about me? That sort of thing. So it's a very, it's a decision-making process that we use constantly and intuitively. But of course, like anything else that we do intuitively, the risk is if we don't realize we're doing it, then we don't realize how that could be introducing errors, and B, we don't realize how it could be exploited by others. Subjectivity drives corporate culture, and it would be nice if we could move towards evidence-based decisions for things like development program frameworks or recruitment frameworks or HR policies or whatever else it might be. What's somebody saying there? Really, performance happens when we can be ourselves and do what we do best. Totally agree. And Phil's point there about buying clothes from a shop is a bit 2019. Yeah, so shopping online, same thing. You're picturing something on the screen. And if you've done anything like order glasses online, there are sites where you can upload a video of yourself and you follow instructions to turn your head. And then it will superimpose this sort of augmented reality, superimpose the frames that you're looking at onto a video, and you can see what you look like. And all this is augmenting this human tendency that we have to piece together bits of information that we have now and project them forward into the future, and then make a decision based on that. And then, of course, we get to the future and find out things aren't exactly how we imagined them, and then we get disappointed. And outcomes driven. If you're going to value your talent, and by talent I mean everybody in the organization, and have cultural impact, then these development programs, the talent programs, have to be for everyone potentially, not just for people we're calling hypos, because just calling somebody a hypo creates its own problems as well. And if we're measuring the right things, not just measuring based on we generated one, project team generated one sales lead, they could have done that anyway without the need for a talent program. That was the mistake in the thinking of the HR people there. They're saying, oh, the program was a success. You didn't need a talent program to put together a bunch of people and create an app to collect sales leads. Anybody could have done that anyway. That's a cultural issue, not a success factor for the talent program. So the fundamental question that we've got to ask ourselves is, do we want cultures or cults? Because if we want to dictate how our leaders lead, we have to remember that leadership fundamentally is based on trust. I said earlier that those qualities of leadership are not behaviors, they're judgments, because leadership is not a behavior. Leadership is a relationship. And as a relationship, it is implicitly based on the subjective perceptions of the people who are in that relationship. What are the qualities that would make you follow leader A versus leader B is entirely up to you. But what it all boils down to is trust. You trust that this leader is going somewhere that you want to go, is being honest with you about where you're going and what the challenges are going to be and what's going to happen when you get there, and is being honest with you about the nature of the relationship. I mean, this is what we want in every relationship. But in leadership, we're often, in a corporate sense, we're putting trust for our livelihoods and our family's livelihoods. I've got my job isn't just a job, it's paying my mortgage, it's keeping a roof over my family's head. So I want to be able to trust in a leader who I think is going to maintain that for me and make it better. So think about high potentials as being teams, not individuals. An individual is not a hypo. A team is a high potential team, a high performing team. And I'm not interested in football myself, but I understand, some people are. And so, to use a football analogy, I think there are teams that will spend huge amounts of money hiring star players from other foreign clubs, and then those players don't deliver. And there's nothing wrong with the player on paper. They're great, but the problem is they're great in the team that they were in, not necessarily in this team with a different culture, different way of working, different way of socializing. And you might think, well, the rules of football are the same everywhere, but that's only the 90 minutes on the pitch. Most of that football team's time is not spent on the pitch in front of the fans. Most of it is spent doing all the other stuff they have to do in order to be able to get on the pitch. Back in the 90s, I worked in the telecoms industry, and the company I worked for, that was the UK's biggest network operator, and a global business as well, decided it was going to get into the enterprise network space, the local office networking, corporate networking space again. Hired 60 new business salespeople from desktop distributors, resellers, very fast moving, low margin, aggressive, competitive businesses. Hired 60 salespeople. After 1 year, how many of those 60 salespeople do you think were left? Just get a number in your head. And the actual number was 1. There was 1 person left after a year. And what happens is, it's a very common thing. Recruiters, and I'll come on to touch on this again later, recruiters will say, I've got this great sales guy, he's amazing, smashes his targets every year, it's going to be fantastic for you. Hire the guy, doesn't perform. And what happens is, the managers will say, well, he obviously lied in his interview, or he lied on his CV, or the recruiter lied. There's another more likely possibility, actually, which is all of that was true, but it was true in a different organizational culture. It can't be true here because the rules are different. So think about high potentials and high performers as teams, not individuals. And in any case, why not allow a leader to build a team in his or her own image? What's wrong with that? Well, it creates a problem for succession planning. If we allow a leader to build a cult of a team around themselves and their own personality, when that leader moves on or is no longer with the business for whatever reason, if we don't replace them with somebody who's exactly like them, as in we create internal succession, it becomes very difficult to create cultural change within that team. It becomes more difficult to do succession planning. And it's not a good idea from the point of view of resilience. If we've got a team of people who tend to all see the world the same way because they've been chosen by the same person according to the same subjective criteria, then we tend to get blind spots. And I know there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years about neurodiversity in teams. I think there's actually something more important that neurodiversity can contribute to, but you don't need neurodiversity in order to have it. I'll come back to that. Oh yeah, so the diversity issue, that's certainly going to be impacted by allowing a leader just free rein to build their own team subjectively. So the fundamental question is, if we've got a team that's built around the leader's personality, it's also built around that leader's blind spots. Because what that leader will do is, by identifying people who are like-minded, they will also, they will tend to select people who are good at the same sorts of things, and therefore implicitly bad at the same sorts of things as well. As I said, leadership is based on trust. We should be selecting high-performing teams, not individuals. And the real issue isn't like-mindedness. The real issue is how the leader handles conflict. Because you can have a leader who does create a cult and does surround themselves by like-minded people, and that's fine if those people are able to disagree. An effective leader will always encourage constructive conflict, and diversity means being able to say, I disagree with you, and that being okay. And I'm sure you've all worked in teams and organizations where you felt that it wasn't okay to disagree. And all that happens is people will sit around a meeting room table and agree with each other, and they will go out the meeting room, and then they will all do what the hell they like because they didn't really agree, because there wasn't honesty, because there wasn't trust. When you've got a high performing team, and hopefully you will have experienced this, you can sit around a meeting room table and somebody will say, well, I don't agree with that. And then you can actually have a proper discussion about it. And maybe the discussion gets heated, but everybody respects each other's opinion at the end. And when the leader says, great, I take all of that into consideration, this is my decision, everybody lives with it because everybody had a say, had a contribution to it. And people are much more likely then to say, you know, I don't agree with it. It wasn't my choice, but you know what? I can see the reasoning for it. So I'm going to support it. And that's something that I've seen in modeling leaders in a variety of global organizations. So the real challenge for us as people professionals is that creating leaders and teams who align to organizational values. That's the easy part. You know, leadership development, for all of its faults, is easy. That's not the difficult bit. The difficult bit, the hard part, is getting leaders to select high potentials or teams contrary to their gut instinct, contrary to the person that they like, that they feel drawn towards, that they just feel like they want to take a gamble on. So do we fall back on evidence-based selection, like, for example, competency-based interviewing? If any of you have been involved in competency-based interviewing, I'm going to guess that you've seen plenty of examples of where, on paper, the person was not the strongest candidate, but the hiring manager found a way to add a couple of extra criteria that skewed the decision in the favor of the person that they liked. So a hiring manager, a leader, will find a way around any objective or pseudo-objective selection-based methodology. So we can kind of kid ourselves that we're doing evidence-based selection. We're probably not. We could use psychometrics, but then we would have to question the validity of psychometrics and what do they really tell us anyway? There was a fascinating bit of research that was done into astrological star signs. So what they did was they took the most statistically valid psychometric test called the Big Five test, and measures things like agreeableness and versus narcissism and so on. I can't remember all the different. I know there's only 5 factors, but I still can't remember. 5-factor test. You'll probably know it by different names. And what they did was they got people's, they went out to thousands of people, they got people's star signs and looked at what kind of personality that person would have according to the star sign. And then they got all these people to complete this Big Five test and look to see if there was a match between what the star sign predicted the person's personality should be and what the personality profile said it is. And what they found, amazingly, was a very high degree of correlation between the two, that the astrological star sign really does predict the person's personality. I know, it's amazing, right? Unbelievable. So unbelievable that they did the research again. This time, they selected respondents who did not already know what their star sign said their personality should be, maybe even didn't know what their star sign was. Did the same process again. This time they found absolutely no correlation at all. What they deduced from this was that when from birth the person is told, oh, you're a born leader, you're going to be you're really strong-willed, or you're really fiery character, or you're really good at creating harmony, you're really good at kind of seeing both sides of things, you're really good at bringing, when people hear these things from birth, their personality will adjust. And that's how malleable our personalities are. And you've all experienced this. You've all gone to, moved into a different role, different business, very different organizational culture, or entered into a relationship with somebody, and your outlook on the world changes, your preferences change, because what we call our personality is something that isn't intrinsic in you. It's intrinsic in the relationship, in the interplay between you and the other person or the other people. And it's how they label you based on how they observe your behavior. It's not what you set out to do. You don't set out to be bullish and fiery and single-minded or whatever it might be. You just set out to do what you think's right and what you think's important and what you want to do. Conflict and resistance isn't coming from you. It's coming from other people disagreeing with you, and how you're handling that. So So, this really has to make us think about how we're using psychometrics. Are they really telling us anything? And are we actually, if we're using them, how are we using them anyway? And what we might find is that sameness or difference within a team actually makes no difference at all. What we have to do is support leaders to create space for constructive conflict. Getting people to say, I disagree with you, is far more important than having people who are this color and that color or whatever it is. Every client I've ever worked with, I think, has had a favorite psychometric profile and they love it. Oh, I love colors. Oh, we love this one, or we love that one. And when when I dig down and find out why do they love it, it's because that one happens to say something that they like about themselves. Well, these are commercial products, so you wouldn't expect them to tell you anything that you didn't like about yourself. So what's the answer? When you look at what your organization really measures and values, does it actually matter whether you have a culture or a cult? When cults work, they work amazingly well. Everybody talks about the cult of Apple. Did it work amazingly well? It worked amazingly well to do certain things and didn't work to do other things. On the downside, when a cult fails, they can take the whole organization down. I've seen companies, and we've all seen companies over the last few years, household names that have disappeared off the planet fundamentally because of leadership cults, and a cult of hide bad news from leaders, hide bad news from the stock market, and bad news tends to find its way out whether you like it or not. And that's created all sorts of problems, and we can all cite examples of that. So what I would suggest is that you start by thinking about what it is that you're measuring, not what you think you're measuring, what you're really measuring. So you might think that you're measuring, for example, employee engagement and staff satisfaction. But if what you're actually doing is saying, hey, our project team created an app that generated a sales lead and that was amazing, what you're actually valuing is sales results. You're actually valuing people who contribute to the sales process. And that's a very common thing because that's where the money seems to be coming from. So let's point everybody at that. So you've got to be honest with yourself about what you're really measuring. And the simple way to tell that is to go and look at what your line managers are actually attending to. Pay attention to where their eyes are going. What are they looking at? What are they commenting on? What are they talking about? What are they saying thank you for? If somebody's doing their job, coming in on time, being a reliable, solid person, just the kind of person you want in the team, is anybody saying thank you for that? If not, it's not being valued. It's being taken for granted. If somebody solves a problem, are they, oh, you did an amazing job at solving that problem? What are you telling people? You're telling them that they are valued for solving problems. What will they do? They will create more problems in order to solve them. As people professionals, and I know that you will hear this in just about every webinar, course, anything that you come across, and particularly from the CIPD, don't be afraid to disagree with leaders. If we are, as a profession, going to be principles-led, evidence-driven, and outcomes-based, we have to stand up to people and say, no, that person's not a high potential. And here's the evidence, and here's the reason why. And if you want to still select them, I can't stop you. But this is why I disagree with you. And support constructive conflict. More than that, support constructive conflict by example, by encouraging it yourself within your own team, by encouraging people to disagree with you if they disagree, not just for the sake of it. And don't count on recruitment to solve the problem. This is a very common thing with recruitment. I find that recruiters and dating services have a lot in common. I don't know if any of you have ever dabbled in the world of online dating. I hope not, but if you have, then recruiters and dating services, I think they create the same myth, which is the one is out there waiting to be found. This perfect person is out there and they're going to find them for you. And in dating, you have to know yourself before you can find the right person for you. All these online dating profiles say, I'm amazing, I've got this full rich life, I've got all these amazing hobbies and amazing friends, and all I need is the perfect partner to complete the picture. If you ever read an online dating profile like that, then that's a sure sign that this person thinks that the only thing that's missing from their life is somebody else that's out there, this one waiting to be found. They're not out there. You've got to be the right person before you can find the right person. And in recruitment, you have to know and be honest about your own culture before you can find the right person to fit in. In both instances, I'm afraid to say honesty is often in short supply. And the ability to be able to say whether it's external recruitment or whether it's selection for a talent program, the ability to be able to say, you know what, this person's great. They're amazing. They're wonderful, but they're not great for us. You know, this candidate you've put forward for the talent program, they're great. They're amazing, but they're not great for the talent program. And that can be, you know, I've certainly seen lots of examples over the years where HR professionals are afraid to have that conversation with leaders, and unfortunately there's no way to do it except for to do it. So our struggle is to consider what principles we're using to select and develop people, to think about what evidence we're basing these decisions on, and are we actually measuring outcomes, or are we just drawing circles around bullet holes? Or we just think, oh, well, there's something that worked really well, let's claim that as a win for the talent program? Are we actually designing measurement in at the beginning and being ruthlessly honest with ourselves and measuring outputs? Because we've got to start somewhere with this. So at the beginning of this presentation, I asked you a question. I asked you to think back over your own career and think about the personal quality, skill, or ability which got you to where you are today. And I want you to ask yourself now, honestly, is this the quality that you are looking for when you're judging potential? And if you look back over people that you've been involved in recruitment and selection and development in the past, have you actually attracted people who show this quality that you see in yourself? If so, what could you do differently? Probably a more important question than that is, should you even do anything differently? What's wrong with doing that anyway? I mean, if you were, I don't know if any of you watch a TV show called Married at First Sight. The Australian version's just finished, hugely entertaining, that these experts match some complete strangers, and the first time they meet each other is when they get married. And then they have to live together for a couple of weeks, and they put them through all these different games. And it's basically a game show where you win a husband or wife. And they claim to match these people on their personalities and their interests and their psychometric profiles and so on. I don't even know that that's the case, but if you're choosing somebody to spend the rest of your life with, you're going to want to make a subjective decision. You're going to want to choose somebody who's right for you. The problem is when you're doing that on behalf of somebody else, like in the case of the experts in Married at First Sight, I've looked at these two people and I think they're going to be a great match. I think their success rate has been pretty miserable. If we judge success that these people actually stay married after the program finishes, their success rate has been pretty miserable so far. I think there's been one couple, certainly, that I've seen in all the series that I've watched of it, that have actually succeeded in that way. So if you're making the match based on somebody else, you've got to get into their heads. You've got to understand and see the world from their point of view. So if what we're talking about is organizational culture, we've got to be ruthlessly honest about what the culture is, not what we'd like it to be, but what it is. So why do talent programs fail? I would summarize as following. To start with, high potential is badly defined. Potential doesn't exist anyway, because potential only exists in the mind of the person imagining the future. So your potential only exists in the mind of the person who's looking at you saying, hey, you're a high potential. I can imagine you being in this, fantastic leadership role in the future. Well, that's nice that you can imagine it, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. So I'm going to go on Next's website and get myself a smart new gold lame suit for the next CIPD branch networking event. And I'm going to picture myself walking into the room and looking amazing. But is that going to match the reality, or will I look like an oven-ready turkey? I don't know. So potential exists in the eye of the beholder. It doesn't exist in the behavior of the person we're assessing. And what it leads to is a necessarily subjective selection of candidates, because we have no other way to select them. And what then happens is the programs focus on development, not on selection. Candidates don't get deselected if they don't live up to expectations. And what I mean by live up to expectations is, for example, a lot of the programs I've been involved with combined a number of elements that are pretty common, I think, for talent programs. They would combine some sort of academic aspect to the program. They would combine some practical action learning, project-based aspect. They would include some coaching or mentoring, these sorts of things. And when clients have asked me the simple question, how can we increase the effectiveness of our talent programs, I've always given them the same answer, which is, it's very, very simple. You deselect people who don't engage with the program. And the first thing they've all done is laugh. And then they realize I'm serious. And then they've said, oh, we can't do that, because that would upset the managers who've nominated those candidates. Well, you're stuck with them then, aren't you? Interesting thing that I found is time and time again, if you plot engagement, and by engagement, what I mean is when the project teams have their meetings, who turns up? When the academic work is being done, who actually engages in attends the sessions, who returns the assignments, who actively solicits feedback, who takes the coaching sessions and uses the coaching sessions. Measuring engagement is really simple. You just see who's shown up. If we want to find out in this session today, who is engaged in this session today, it's the people I can see on the screen in front of me. The 51 participants take me out of it, 50 participants I can see. There's your measure of engagement. What we can't say is, well, are you doing anything else while you're listening to me, or on your phone? Are you having your lunch? Are you paying? I don't know, but that doesn't matter, because if you're not here, then nothing else matters. At least if you're here, we've got half a chance. And that's, and that's a really reliable, simple, straightforward measure. So looking at these 9 talent programs, the people who didn't engage in the learning aspect, they also didn't engage in the coaching, and they also didn't turn up to their project sessions, except for the final presentation to the country manager or the CEO or whoever the highest program sponsor was. Oh, they'd be there then. They'd be there standing at the front of the room with their team doing the final presentation, taking their share of the credit, even though they hadn't actually done anything through the whole duration of the program. And I'm sure you can identify with people who've done that. So engagement's a really simple thing to measure. And if we just deselect people, not as a punishment, but as a way of saying, if this person isn't engaged in the process, then the process isn't right for them right now. Maybe next year it will be, maybe never. Maybe this isn't the right way to develop this person. Because what happens is, if we put everybody in, it just becomes a sausage machine. We get everybody out the other end, whether they're engaged or not. It becomes a development program. We put everybody through it. And the uplift in that person's capability will be relative to where they came in and their level of engagement throughout. And what I found consistently is a quarter of participants, or around about a quarter to a third of participants, just never engage. From the beginning to the end, never engage in the program. About a quarter to a third will fully engage, whatever the program design is, whatever the content is. They will say, wow, this is great. I've been identified as a hypo. I'm going to put my all into this. I'm going to make this my priority. They were the people who attended all the sessions, took all the coaching sessions and more, worked hard in the assignments, actively solicited feedback. It doesn't matter what the program design is. We scratch our heads as L&D professionals and worry about the details of the program design. I think it actually turns out program design is irrelevant. If we give those people who are willing to engage any support and development, they will run with it. And the ones at the bottom end, doesn't matter what we give them, they will ignore it. If we deselect those people, we instantly increase the effectiveness of the program. I think the interesting group are the group in the middle, the third to a half who sit in the middle, whose engagement is sporadic based on what else is going on and what's actually being measured in their job. So, for example, one of the companies that had a very, very strong focus on sales performance that ran over a quarterly and then an annual schedule. If I look at four years running, I was involved in a talent program for them, for that company. If I look at the bar charts showing how many coaching sessions each month have been taken, what I see is an exact match of a quarterly decline in attendance at coaching sessions, matching the dates of their sales quarters, meaning that the more pressure they're under to close sales, the more that everything else becomes a low priority. As soon as we clock over into a new month, they're back up to high engagement again. And then that overall pattern declines throughout the year, because towards the end of the year, there's huge potential on them to bring in any final sales results that they can. So if we just deselect people who can't engage, or don't want to engage, who are just, the pressures of their work don't allow them to engage, that it's not the right time for them. That's fine. They're not a bad person. They're a fantastic, wonderful person, but this isn't the right program for them right now. And as I say, it's a simple way to increase the effectiveness of the program, but one which I'm actually yet to see anybody implement. And I'd love to hear if any of you have actually done that. And if we don't deselect people from the program, the culture perpetuates. Because one of the other interesting things that I found that happens is, especially with the people in that bottom quarter to a third, the people who don't engage, what happens is as soon as they get told they're a hypo, they lose interest completely. They sit back on their laurels and they say, well, I've been recognized as a hypo. They take it as a recognition, not an opportunity. They take it as, well, I'm a hypo, so now I can literally do no wrong. I can just sit back and my next promotion is guaranteed. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we have when we don't deselect people from programs. And what happens is that the people who are willing to engage and willing to do the work, they'll look at the people who are not doing any work and say, well, hang on a minute, why am I doing all the work on this project team when these two people are saying they're members of the project team and they're taking the credit for our hard work? They've never been to a single meeting. That breeds resentment, which creates mistrust, which creates the wrong kind of conflict within a team. So what do we do instead? We create opportunities for everybody, not just the people that we've subjectively assessed as high potentials. How do we do that? Very simple. We rotate delegation within and across teams. Rather than saying, well, we've got a succession plan and it's got one person in it for each role, everybody in a team is a successor for that team's manager. We have no way of knowing what those people are capable of until we get them to do it. So if we make delegation a fundamental part of the job, and we rotate delegation and see who actually does, steps up and does what's been delegated to them, and the ones that don't, it isn't because they can't, it isn't because they're incapable, it isn't because they're not good people. It's because at that time that was either not right for them or not aligned with what their interests are, or they didn't have the right support, or whatever. We don't hold it against them. But if we don't rotate routine delegation, we have no way of knowing if these people are actually going to be able to do a higher hierarchical level of role when the opportunity comes along. And we select people then when it comes to selection time based on their actual performance. I mean, this is what we do in the sports world. If we're selecting athletes for the Olympics, we don't say, oh, who do we think looks good in a tracksuit? We say, well, let's put them on a track and see who runs the fastest. You run the fastest, you're in the team. We don't, well, he's tall. I mean, he looks fit. I bet he's a good runner. We don't do that. We actually measure people based on what they have done, not what we think they might be able to do, because we know that's subjective. That's projective. It's more than subjective. It's projective. We're taking what we want and we're imposing it on the world as we see it. And we develop people based on engagement. And we support and we role model constructive conflict to drive diversity in thinking. Most important for all of this, we've got to be honest about what the real organizational culture is. There are so many businesses up and down the country and across the world that have posters on the wall with, these are our values, and those values bear no relation to what they are actually encouraging and rewarding and recognizing within the business. Recognition is what you look at, what you say thank you for, not what you get gift vouchers or a promotion for. And if we align programs with the desired culture, and be honest that that isn't the culture right now, but that's the route that we're taking to get there, and that's our best guess of what we think that culture is going to be. That's going to certainly put us in a better position than manhandling a bunch of misfits through a development through a talent program, because we don't want to upset the managers that have selected them. So in terms of impact, the research, as I said, I'm going to give you a couple of websites there, where as soon as I upload it this afternoon, you'll be able to download the research reports. It's got tangible value for the organization, and you can easily reproduce this research yourself within your own organization, because I've shared what the methodology was, and if you've got any questions on that, then you're welcome to ask. And enable us as people professionals to deliver real impact. The only way we can deliver real impact is if we know what impact actually looks like, is if we know how to actually measure that. So coming up to the end of what I have to say for you today, my website is genius.coach, and you will find this report actually in the research section on there. I'll also put a link to it on another site, which is cpd.works. And as I say, give me a couple of hours to get that uploaded, and I'll have the research report on there as well. And that's it. So I'm gonna let me think. Oh, there's me, and I'm actually in the middle of writing a book as well, based on the research report, Building Your Career Capital, which is really aimed at the high potential, how they can exploit all of this subjectivity to be recognized as a high potential and be selected, and to accelerate their career development, and how to use what we've discovered about how to get inside the head of how the leader thinks, and how they do that process of projecting forward in time. Because as I say, if you're making those decisions subjectively, somebody is taking advantage of that, somebody is exploiting that. The whole marketing industry exists to exploit your subjectivity. And so there's got to be a place for that for your career future as well.